Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us between the covers. My name is Bradley Shaw, and tonight I'm speaking with author Marian French, who has written a beautiful book on entitled A Lavender Affair. So good evening, Marian. How are you?
Good evening, Bradley. Lovely to see you.
Very good. And so tell us all about this beautiful book that you've written.
Well, it is a beautiful book because the subject is a very popular one as regards gardening. It's basically a gardening book, but I've interspersed it dealing with lavender, how to grow it, how to use it in and out of the garden. So there's lots of chapters dealing with lavender in the home and in the garden, and medicinally too. So
Yep.
this all began years ago when I was growing lavender commercially for the fresh cut flower trade here in Sydney. And people kept asking me, you should write a book. Well, of course, I was so busy with the lavender patch that, and the farming side of things, I didn't have much time until I finally did begin. And of course, unfortunately, my husband got sick with cancer and it was a very bad time, and I never actually finished the book.
Okay.
And I put it away as a bad experience, but recently, a friend said to me, Marian, you should do something with that book. It's sitting there in a drawer, not being, it's sad that people can't see such a good lot of information that you've put into it over the years. So a friend said to me, Marian, instead of putting out a dry old gardening textbook, why don't you put the storyline in of how you and Frank moved up to the country side here on the Central Coast, bought this dilapidated old farm and few acres, and began growing lavender, and all the experiences that you came across dealing with tentative neighbours and builders, pesky builders I might add, and put all the experiences and all the funny things that happened during that time while you were establishing the farm. Yeah. So I thought, that's one way of doing it. So I put my head down and got going, and this is what eventuated a gardening book with a journal line interspersed throughout the story.
Yeah, and that worked so well. That's what impressed me the most. It wasn't just a gardening book. It was a gardening journey. You know, it was your story about, as you say, it had such a personal inflection into the whole process of the book. So it's such a beautiful thing you compiled, and a personal thing too. So it's not just, your passion and love of flowers, but the personal input that you shared with the readers.
Yes.
So, as you said, is writing the book just for that purpose of that closure, or was the writing something you wanted to always do, as you said, but just didn't have that time, or is just that book particularly you wanted to share?
Well, I think that book was one that I always wanted to write, and I have published 2 other books previously, one to do with gardening and the other was The Joys of Christmas. And they were just small books that I'd put out years ago. And I became so busy with the farm, lavender, and just general living that I never got back to writing, but I always had that urge to write. Always, yes. And I think the inspiration came when I wrote a small article for a magazine, and I ended up getting paid a check, and I thought, this is fabulous in the days of checks, and I thought, this is good, but I never really ever had the time. And as you know, as a writer, you've just got to dedicate yourself to that one thing and set your mind to it and do it.
Yeah, always set the routine up. As long as you can balance it in your routine, if you can get the right, I think, as you say, if you can get the right balance of your work, your life, your family, and a bit of time for writing, yeah. But as you say, sometimes though you do have to make choices that are, you know, more important than sometimes you know, the things we love to do. So having you know, the questions I normally ask too in researching this book. I mean, obviously, the research was living it. You were evolving not only, you know, the passion of your experiences and your love of lavender, but also, you know, that was your research in the writing. So really, it was sitting down and just revising or revisiting your memories and bringing them back into the book. So how was that for you? It wasn't
easy. It wasn't easy because it was already written as a gardening book. So I had to work very hard to intersperse with the stories and the events that happened over the years while we were developing the patch. And it took a lot of effort to sort of get a storyline going and keeping it flowing through to keep people's interest, and still keep the gardening book in there as well. I got carried away a bit. I could have put a lot more personal stories in, but I thought, this is a gardening book, Marian, stop, you know.
That's right. Your memoirs are going to come next, is that right? So the bigger story, the bigger picture?
I've got memoirs, but that's for family only.
Oh, for family only.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So how many hours did you find you were able to write? Like once you sat down and created the discipline to write this book, the decision?
It wasn't until I reached the age I am now, later in life, that I actually got down to writing, and I have been for the last 10 years doing a bit of writing. I belong to writing groups, and I've moved to a different location. I don't have all the work with a big garden and an old house anymore. I've got this tiny little fisherman's cottage here in Pretty Beach, and it's a lovely community. And my daughter said to me when I moved here 8 years ago, "Now, Mum, you're going to have time. Why don't you sit down and do something with the lavender book?"
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, I could do that. I could really do that. But then again, how am I going to find time? But I did. I did. But I think the older you get, the more involved you get with community and people.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got to keep yourself active mentally, physically. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And you've got a little bit more time too.
With COVID, of course, that was a good opportunity to get a lot done.
Yeah, and then so will this be, will there be more books from Marian French for readers to enjoy? Will they be able to see, you know, other gardening or story episodes of your experiences with certain gardenings? Or what's your plans for the future of other things?
I haven't got a lot of, I have a book a novel. I'd love to have written a novel.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, particularly as I've been involved with this writing group.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a lighthouse keeper.
Oh, wow.
And I remember him well down in Queenscliff in Victoria.
Wow.
So my father grew up as a lighthouse keeper's son, and I did a trip down the shipwreck coast around Victoria and back up to Sydney, doing research for that and collecting a lot of stories. And I've got a lot from my father himself and his brother, vocal and talking tapes. So I've got the background and the research done, but I haven't got down to the book. But who knows? Who knows?
Fantastic. No, that sounds exciting. Sounds intriguing. So for you as a child, when you were younger, you know, what did you like to read? Were you always infatuated with garden? Was it something was that something you grew into the love of? How did it start for you when you were younger? Where were you? What was your journey in?
Well, I was an only child, and I grew up in the suburbs on the outskirts of the suburbs in Sydney here, more or less in the country areas. So, and I always loved animals.
Yeah.
So anything interested me, whether it was a beetle or a grasshopper or a whatever, and butterflies, all those things. I can I was always bringing them inside in a jar. But it was my great-grandmother in Tasmania that instilled the love of gardening.
Wow.
I used to go there every Christmas from Sydney to visit my great-grandmother, and we'd go by ship from Sydney down to Hobart.
Wow.
And we'd visit her every year, and she loved to garden. She had hollyhocks head high in the garden. You could walk through her garden and see hollyhocks and all the old-fashioned flowers, and of course lavender. So it was her that introduced me to lavender when I was 4 years old. And she showed me all the things you can use it for, and I never forgot that. Always remembered those holidays over there in her garden. And she taught me so much, and it never left me.
Wow,
it never left me. So I became a gardener, I think, when I was 4 years old.
Well done. So going through school and still having that love of nature and gardening, did you evolve into horticulture naturally? Did you find you wanted to do that as a career, or was it more you went off on another path at first, had your own families and such, but then moved into gardening? Yeah.
And it wasn't until later years that I really got involved into the horticultural side of nursery work and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we always kept a very nice garden, always, I was forever trawling around nurseries to see what was new and what was happening.
Yeah.
So it was a natural progression from the time I was 4 years old. There was always that little bit of interest. But I've been involved with environmental groups as I've got older, and very keen on environmental issues, heritage.
Good.
And of course gardens come into that too.
Oh, they do. Yeah, no, it's very important.
I'm a great tree hugger.
So you chained up in front of a tree, in front of a tractor one day?
I have done that.
You have? You've been the rebel, yeah?
I have done that. I've called council out on various occasions when trees were coming down, yeah.
Good. Well, someone needs to speak up. I agree. Someone needs to watch out for nature as much as they do, technology and development. We have to still reserve and preserve what our culture is and our nature.
We do.
There's so many things now about that. So, but tell me, so this book that you've created, this lovely book, what do you hope readers get out of it for themselves? What are you really looking for them to understand about your story and your gardening experience?
Well, that you can do anything if you really try. I mean, when I had the idea of growing lavender on the central coast of New South Wales, absolutely the wrong climate for growing lavender. It's too humid, really. Yeah. But if you give a plant the right conditions, such as soil and sun and all those requirements, you can grow practically everything. But of course, you have to go to a lot of trouble to do this. I mean, I was always fighting fungal problems, all those sort of things, because it wasn't really the right climate. I needed to be up in the mountains with an altitude. But I was determined to grow it. I thought, no, I'm going to do it, I can do it. So I pushed on, and it eventually worked out, but it was a lot of hard work and a lot of effort in keeping the plants and the flowers in a condition that was suitable for market.
Absolutely. And that's the thing with gardening, is it's a very physical attribute too. It's a very physical task of doing the work. That's right. Yeah, I admire you for that, taking that challenge on, as you say.
Yes. And the thing was, when we moved up there weren't, the availability of fresh cut lavender flowers was almost nil. I was always looking for it, and I always had it in my garden, and it was such a great flower to take to people in hospitals or older people. It was such a personal flower that had all the extra attributes such as medicinally and helping you sleep and all these things. That's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, was all the other information that's available on lavender, medicinally and health-wise, and used in medicinal treatments.
Yeah.
I wanted people to be aware of all the things that you can use this plant for, and had been used since 16th century or earlier.
Yeah, no, it's an old plant, that's for sure. No.
Yeah.
So tell me, was your family very supportive? Were you getting a lot of support for writing the book? I mean, you were, as you say, it was a difficult revision and difficult process. Did you get a lot of help, a lot of support?
A lot of support. They were busy doing their own things, of course. My daughters were busy growing up and going their own ways, but they were always happy to help and were always interested, even when they were overseas, always interested in hearing about how the lavender patch was going.
Good.
And they used to come to help me down in Paddington markets in Sydney on a Saturday morning. Yeah. They'd come and sit on the stall with me and help me. I got all the help I needed. And when I first began writing, they presented me with an Olivetti, a brand new one, I might add, Olivetti typewriter. In those days, there were no computers. They presented it to me and said, "Go, Mum, go, write."
That is it. That's the fun of writing too.
Yeah, my husband was very supportive. And he said to me, not long before he died, he said, "Marian, I want you to finish that book." And he said, "If you don't, I'll be upstairs there and I'll sprinkling you with something to remind you that I'm there watching." Yeah, so...
Well, I'm sure you've done him proud. It's a wonderful book.
I'm so pleased, Brad, that you're doing it for me now.
Oh, I'm glad. No, it's a beautiful book. I'm very proud to be a part of it. And for everybody watching the video too, Marian's book is available as of May. Early May, you can pre-order for Mother's Day, and you can also order through May and through winter for preparing your garden for lavender in the spring. But yes, it's a beautiful book. So grab it at any local bookstore. And we do support local business, so please do support your local bookstores to grab this great book. And also you can order it online if you don't have a bookstore in your town or area. But so continuing on for you, Marian, did you find what was the biggest challenge or difficulty you experienced when writing the actual book? Like, was it during your artistic process, we'll call that, was it hard for you, or did you find challenges in the writing itself?
Well, it's a lot easier to write about something that you understand and you know a lot about, having had the practical experience. It's quite easy. The hard part for me was putting the personal side and weaving that into the gardening book itself. Yeah. That was a hard challenge to do.
Yeah.
And it really took a lot of effort. I nearly gave up and thought, no, I'll write a completely new book rather than try and do this mishmash. But it's turned out okay, as you've seen. And
it turns out great. I love it. So
it was a hard write.
Did you find good support with the editing? Did you get through that process okay? Did that help you understand the writing, the construction of your book, the layout for your book? Did that help you with the editing? Was good for you?
It was, yes.
So having done this task and having completed a book yourself now and delved into, the world of being an author, what would you tell someone else looking to start a book or a project now that you have some experience in that sort of first time process? Or even though you've done a few books, I mean, you've had some experience in writing. So what would you share with someone new?
I think the old adage, that old one that we learn as when we begin writing, is don't tell a story, show your story. And
Absolutely.
That's always stood by me all through my writing. Yeah. And it's a good thing to remember. And I think that's an important part of writing.
Absolutely. And one of the things in that where you express your story in the Lavender Affair is your pictures. I mean, you've shown some beautiful pictures of gardening and areas and farming. That's a very, very, I guess, additive to the story, to the book.
It is.
It just brings so much personal visualization into it as well.
Yes.
You're not just making it a textbook, which is wonderful. So,
yes.
and
Picture
I
tells
suppose
1,000 stories, isn't it? That what they say?
it does. It does.
Yeah.
Everybody has one. Everybody has a different interpretation of that story in the picture, I assure you. Yeah. So when you're writing, what did you notice that you maybe developed any interesting quirks? I always ask this question. Some writers write to certain music, they write in certain areas of their house, they write in certain clothing, but they've always got a little quirk. It's just their own little thing that they have to usually do just to give themselves on. What's your little quirk?
I always use a pencil to write. I don't sit at
Okay.
the computer.
Yeah.
I sit and write first, and then I sit
notepad,
down.
pencil.
And I do all my thinking on my walks in the morning. It's always early morning.
Yeah.
And I come home and I just scribble, and then I sit at the computer and write. Yeah.
It's probably the best way to do it too. Just get that brain
But I don't
clear,
use a
clear.
pen.
You don't
I
use
don't use a pen.
No.
I use a pencil.
Yeah. Do you rub out or scratch out, or do you just screw up
I
the page and start
scratch out.
again?
Yeah.
Yeah, scratch it out. So, what do you like to do, I guess, when you're not writing? I mean, as you say, now that you've got more time, what are you doing with yourself? You're involved, you said earlier, in communities. What sort of groups do you get into?
Well, until recently, I was on our local council's Environmental and Heritage Committee for the last 20 years. But I let that go when I was thinking of writing the book. I thought I'll do I can't do both.
Yeah.
That and I've been on Keep Australia Beautiful committee, local one here. So I've kept myself busy.
Yeah, good.
Not meaning to, but it just happens, you get involved with these issues that you want to do something about. And so that and just generally enjoying life now.
Good.
I've slowed down a lot. As I said, I've got out a few committees, and I've just I'm involved with our little heritage church here at Kincumber.
Lovely.
So I'm friends of that, and we're always striving to raise money for the maintenance of the little stone church. Wow. So I'm still involved in heritage issues.
Wow, well done. Yeah, that's good. And you've worked hard, like through your story you've shared, it's obvious you had you've put your life into everything you've done, you put yourself into it all. And so now it doesn't hurt, and there's no crime in having a bit of time for yourself.
That's what I feel. At long last it's happened.
Yeah. So I hope you do write your novel. I hope you spend some time, Marian, writing more. You write very well,
Thanks, Brad.
I will say.
Thanks, Brad.
So now your book's out, and we're looking at the next 6 months. Hopefully, getting some great feedback from readers and seeing the results in some sales and some benefits to people's experience with your book. What would you identify for yourself in the way you see things? What would literary success be for you from this?
The culmination of quite a few things, of finally completing a book that I feel will benefit a lot of people in regards to learning things, new things, and a different approach to growing their lavender in their garden. So I'm looking forward to sharing all those things with the readers, and I'm sure that they will be surprised at the mountain of information that they can find out about that little lavender plant. Yeah.
But not only that, it's your personal journey as well, which is another added value to that book. As much as it's a wonderful gardening book in that love of lavender, it is your journey. It is your sharing, yourself. So I know. I think you've already succeeded well, far and beyond any expectation. So the next steps are just going to be really I hope good feedback for you. and enjoy the process and experiences. So what I'd like to do is everybody who loves gardening and has loved watching Marian, please do go to your bookstore and grab a copy of this beautiful book. It's available everywhere books are sold, as I said. Support your local bookstores, of course. And Marian, thank you so much for your time tonight, for talking to us and for writing such a wonderful book.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you very much for all your help and getting it to this stage. Yes, thank you very much for that. And I've yet to see the printed copy, and I look forward to very much.
Yes, no, it's not far away now, and everyone, your copies, when you order them, won't be far away either. May 15th is the official release date, but it is available for pre-sale, so you can pre-order it now and get it ready. So, but we will talk again soon, Marian. Thank you so much for your time, and goodbye, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad. Goodbye.
Now.